Hello, and welcome to Movies We Dig, the podcast about films, antiquity, and everything in between. I'm Christy Vogler.
I'm Elijah Fleming.
And once again, it is girls' night here on the podcast. No, nobody is trying to get vengeance on Colin. We promise he's okay. But instead, joining us this evening is another special return guest, Christina Hotalen. Welcome back.
Hello. Thank you for having me.
Yeah. So as all our listeners might remember, Christina is the program manager and communications lead for the Institute of Social Science Research at University of Massachusetts Amherst. That was a mouthful, but I got through it. She's a scholar specializing in gender and women, material culture, digital humanities, and also an amazing jewelry designer under the amazing name In Chain in the Membrane. So go check out her store if you haven't seen it yet, because it's really cool. And yeah, Christina is here today to help me and Lige unpack the third season. They number this strangely of Starz' Spartacus, titled Vengeance. And that literally Vengeance. It literally like the rule for watching this season should have been every time someone says vengeance,
I know.
you take a drink, you take a shot.
And then you'll end up in the hospital.
You really will. Alcohol poisoning, 100%.
Yep.
Yeah, if you make the mistake I made once again of binging like 3 or 4 episodes a day.
You gotta stop doing that, Christy. Although I also did that this time.
Yep. Yes. So this story follows Spartacus, this time played by Liam McIntyre, who replaced Andy Whitfield, which we've talked about the reason for that in a couple of the previous episodes now. This is after he and his fellow gladiators killed their master, Batiatus. No more John Hannah for us to enjoy, unfortunately.
Really sad.
Yeah. And escaped the ludus. Cast members and characters who returned from the first season surprisingly includes Lucy Lawless as Lucretia in her, what I like to think of as Cassandra phase. I don't know how else to think about it, frankly. Who else do we have? We have Peter Menza as Oenomaus returning, Manu Bennett as Crixus. Did the romance get better? Kind of. It was a little better. I don't hate it as much as season 1.
Sure. Okay.
All right, I'm going to butcher this name. Dan Ferrier-Gell as Agron, Nikki Terabe as Osher, which we're going to talk about because of the sequel that is happening. Viva Bianca as Alithia, and Craig Parker as Gaius Claudius Glaber. The eye roll done by Seppius was just so well done.
I cannot take the man seriously. Even just saying his name, I'm just laughing.
Glaber.
And best of all, we have Dustin Clare reprising his role as Gannicus, coming back from the prequel season, which we were very happy to see.
Yes.
Yeah, we like Gannicus.
We sure
my
do.
favorite character now.
There's a lot of new characters to talk about, and unfortunately I didn't have time to go find their actors' names. Apparently there's a new actress portraying Navia, who I'm sure we'll talk about her a bit. Nasser is a big one, and he becomes the love interest of Agron for another positive queer relationship shown on screen, which was really cool. Who else am I missing? Oh, Seppia. So Seppia and Seppius and Verinius. And I think the other guy I want to talk about is all these Latin names, is Gaius, the guy who's hanging out in the temple who lost all of his land and family.
Yeah.
Isn't it? Lucius. Yes,
yeah.
It is Lucius. That is correct. Because I think that also provides some really interesting historical context to think about for what's going on in this season. So yeah, we have a lot to unpack today. But as usual, we're going to ask our guest, Christina, first, can you tell us, what is your history with this series? How did you come upon it? And then let us know what you think about Spartacus Vengeance, this season in particular.
So, I'm assuming that y'all have had that one guy in your undergrad Roman history classes who always talked about Spartacus in movies like 300 and just going on about them and always making it a point to bring back the TV show and all that. Yeah, that's how I first learned about Spartacus. And out of spite, I never watched it up until fairly recently. And so I did something similar to what y'all have done where you've binged the episodes. Yeah, I binged almost the entire season in like one day because it's like, well, I have nothing else to do, so why not? I can understand why people talk about Spartacus the way that they do, because you see all like the violence, the gore, and like, you see men in little tighties, their little loincloths and all that. But yeah, it definitely has like this machismo about it that I can understand why all the Roman history bros would always talk about it. But yeah, so I actually watched it. I watched the first season about a year or two ago, and I was doing a live Twitter like reaction thread to it at the
Oh,
time.
nice.
And yeah, it was all sorts of crazy. And then fairly recently, I actually started watching it again as Alexandra Stills and I were writing our paper on Spartacus and Metal. And so I watched it again fairly recently, and I watched the rest of the season, but I didn't watch the first time around. And I only got up to like season 3 fairly recently, but I just stopped watching it because I had things to do. And I mean, really, what's the point anyways? I know what's going to happen. Like, okay, well, they all die.
That is true. I used to joke in history classes, like, spoiler alert, they die. Some way, somehow. These people are dead, you guys.
Right, and that was always like my whole argument against watching the show at the time. I was like, why is there a show about this guy when all of them die anyways? But yeah, so as far as whether or not I dig it, I'm kind of a mixed bag, although I do like Vengeance a little bit more than the first season. I thought the second season of them doing like the flashback to the House of Batiatus was really cool. It definitely made a lot of sense as far as like explaining like why things are the way they were and how things came to be and all that. So I'm kind of a mixed bag because as I was listening to the first podcast episode about the first season, Blood and Sand, it definitely made me think about what I was watching as far as like the fact that this is all being told through, I mean, it's very obvious that men are writing the show, and even like the relationships, like no matter how quote unquote progressive they are for like these types of shows about antiquity, it kind of is and it kind of isn't. But I mean, as far as like just mindless entertainment, yeah, sure, it's fine. Other than that, yeah. Sorry, I know that was a whole lot of
no, like it was a great like reminder of our earlier thoughts too, of like, yeah, where did this all begin? I started talking about it. It's like, this isn't a diamond in the rough show. This is like a flawed diamond buried in charcoal. Like, it's shiny. There's some glimmers there, but like it needs to be put in better hands in some regards, because I think especially like pre-Me Too, this is fairly progressive in media, considering there hasn't actually been this big I just watched Quiet on Set, the whole thing about Nickelodeon and Dan Schneider, and I'm like, yeah, there's my childhood. And we're still really going through that reckoning of like, what was television like in the 90s and early 2000s. So kudos to Spartacus to some regard here. The thing that I really liked about this season is just really dealing with the dynamics of like, oh, okay, a bunch of guys have just escaped the ludus. Now what? And I think they did a good job of really thinking about that question and like, how do you become a movement of tens of thousands of people?
Right.
So I thought that was cool. But then it's, it's got its usual. I think I posted the other day, it's like every fight scene, what is it, his name, Juvenile or whatever, his song Slow Motion going in my head, because it just always breaks down like that. So yes, continues to be a mixed bag. We'll unpack more about like, why is it a mixed bag this time? But that's about where I'm at too. How about you, Laj?
I feel like in watching this, I've like come all the way around. I've like made an entire circle and I'm leaning into it. I'm like, is this fun? Am I entertained? Am I enjoying this? So maybe I am also extremely confused, but I felt like I could more easily lean into it, maybe because I like knew what was coming. It's like none of it was really that surprising. It's oddly consistent in all aspects. And I think Christy, that you're right when you said like the dynamics between these people. I feel like they had a plan. Like they weren't just kind of going off into nowhere. They were like, okay, these are our characters and how they would react in said situations. And then, like, it was a well plotted season. I feel like I think they seemed to know what they wanted to get out of it, and it was cohesive, and I was kind of surprised because I kind of thought that getting away from the ludus and like the arena was gonna be a weird change, because the gladiator fights were such a big part of the first season.
They didn't fully get away from it this season.
Well,
they're like,
it's exactly what they do. They kind of like make it go back to their roots, and they have like the army training and fighting each other. And so it's like a different type of ludus that they have created for themselves.
Yeah.
The entire mine siege bothered me so much, and we can also get into that, but their entire trip down the mines made me so angry.
Yeah.
So I guess that I am also a very mixed bag, because I think what they're doing it well, and I guess it's fun. Maybe.
I will say, like, their storylines, like the prequel, I was amazed at how well they like took like threads that didn't have to go anywhere from season one. There's like, we can actually broaden this out and tell a really good story. And I feel like they did. The writing in terms of plot and like twists are, I think, really good. Like it is entertaining on that level.
Yeah.
So it's like, I'm glad to see that like that hasn't really changed. That's probably the only thing that is keeping it really good for like what is good, the shiny part of it, along with, still asking these complex questions about, this is a really weird historical moment that took place, and like what did that actually look like in terms of the perspective of slaves in Rome. And it's like, there's not a lot of media that's doing that.
Right.
And I think it's really cool that someone tried. At least I want someone to try again, but it was a good first attempt, I will say.
I've always thought that like Spartacus is one of those figures that I think we mythologize so much that it's sometimes it's like, oh yeah, he was real. And like, oh yeah, we do have actual historic, like, records that talk about the Battle of Vesuvius, which did happen. And like aspects of that battle, like they did rappel down the mountain, right? Like they talk about creating
set in Plutarch,
like weird ropes to climb
out of weeds.
And to go around. And I'm like somebody did their homework.
Yeah. Although I did read Plutarch's account of that, and what it was is like they had so many weeds they made ladders, according to him.
Okay.
And everyone climbed down the ladders except for one guy at the top who threw the weapons down to him, and then he climbed down.
I love it. It's like, I know, so fun.
And I just like to think that the modern writers just like, no one's gonna buy that. Instead, our four best guys are going to go down and find the flaming balls of fire that is used in all of this media with Roman.
I know. Oh my God.
Like, we can't get away with, damn you, gladiator, and your flaming balls of fire and warfare.
But still, like, that was entertaining. I was entertained. I was kind of like giggling to myself, like Gannicus, Crixus, and Spartacus and
Agron.
Like, it only takes 4 people to load a trebuchet. Like, let's or catapult, whatever it is,
who go through 10 episodes without any real armor.
I know.
So that's another thing that Plutarch says is like he talks about their initial escape from the ludus, and like all they didn't actually have weapons originally. All they were able to get was like kitchen implements like knives and skewers. And then once they got out of the ludus, they found a bunch of wagons that just happened to have a bunch of weapons to like go that was going to another gladiator school. So they grabbed those. But as soon as they could, they got, according to Plutarch? No. What? Oh, too many Romans, guys. Too many Romans. It is Plutarch. But yeah, so like that, those were initial weapons. But as soon as they could, they got rid of them because Plutarch is like, oh, they thought they were like barbaric and not, it wasn't the noble way to fight. Which, if you think about it, if these were like men who had been prisoners of war, they probably don't want a net and a trident.
Yeah, I mean, I can see that. Yeah.
So yeah, it's really interesting to see, like, going back and reading the primary sources and then seeing what ends up in the show. It's actually really impressive that like someone was doing the basic reading.
Yeah, somebody did do their homework. And yeah, I do think it's fun that, we even get to talk about Spartacus, because so much of his story seems so weird and fantastical. Mm-hmm. And it's like, well, a lot of it seems to have actually happened. So yeah, I think it's fun.
Yeah. So this brings me I got to watch your guys' presentation that you did on Spartacus and metal music. So Christina, can you tell us a little bit about like what your guys' research found? And then what did you also think about metal music being used in the show Spartacus?
Well, okay, so to answer your first question about the paper we presented, so essentially, like, what we discovered was, while the movies were taking an active political stance on who Spartacus is, whether he was like, supposed to be kind of like the communist hero, kind of, before he got watered down by the movie executives in the 1960 film. But in metal, we actually don't see any of these bands taking a political stance at all, with the exception of one white nationalist band who uses Spartacus in a triumvirate of very odd people like Titus and Alexander the Great and then Spartacus, which is so weird because, Karl Marx called Spartacus, the most splendid man. So it's like the only reason why we came to that conclusion was because Spartacus is the only gladiator, I mean, other than Crixus, but no one talks about Crixus. Spartacus is the only gladiator we really know by name who's achieved the most fame, throughout antiquity. And from what we gathered, there were two other bands that we looked at in this paper, and they both happen to be Italian bands, or bands from Italy with roots in Rome. So they're, so they're natives, so to speak, of the land. I don't know if that's the right word to use. Sorry about that.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Descendants of, I don't know, descendant communities. It's another one we like to use in archaeology.
So, so you have these two Italian bands that are using or making music about Spartacus, I should say. There's actually one album to Spartacus himself, like a whole concept album dedicated to Spartacus and the Gladiators from one of those Italian bands. But, the conclusion that we came to was these bands, they're using the story of Spartacus and they're using Latin phrases, whether or not they make contextually sense is a different story. But they're using Spartacus as kind of like, or they're singing about Spartacus in a way to like pay homage to like their cultural heritage and identity as Italians and Romans. And at least for one of the bands, I tried to get a hold of one of them to interview them, but they got busy, I guess, with recording their new album, which, I mean, that's fair, whatever. Things get buried under email. But according to the artist, at least, who designed the cover art for that album, he explained to me that the band wanted to bring the story of Spartacus to life in the style of death metal. So they wanted the blood, the gore, the violence of the arena, and they wanted to convey that in a death metal album. And so, I mean, it's a good album, I will say, as a fan. But yeah, I thought that was interesting that, like, for a lot of these bands, they're just interested in presenting a good, entertaining story. They're not really trying to make a political statement or any type of statement at all, other than look at this badass dude, a gladiator who, rose from the bottom all the way up and, was an actual challenge and threat to Rome and the sort of institutions, associated with Rome, like slavery and all that. And so, yeah, it was actually kind of interesting. We sort of came to that conclusion together, not knowing that's the conclusion we would come to. I mean, personally, I think we were hoping that we could just interview one of the bands, but the artist of the cover art really gave a good idea of like what the bands were thinking, and that actually helped us inform our conclusions on what the heck these bands were doing with gladiators. But as far as Spartacus, I should say. But as far as gladiators go, I mean, so much music about gladiators have been made since 1980. So
Mhm.
it continues to be a popular topic. And we see actual peaks of like how many songs and tracks there are released about Spartacus and gladiators during the release of like the movie Gladiator. And then with the Spartacus TV show, we see an even bigger increase in music. So
Mhm.
yeah, it's interesting how like pop culture or how movies and TV shows inform music and how, you know, metal bands are interested in that. If anything, just to present a cool story about a badass dude who's just, you know, taking down people and giving
Mhm.
systems, run for their money.
I mean, that's just it. Is so much music and television is really meant to be atmospheric, especially if it doesn't have lyrics in it. And so I was trying to pay attention of like, what kind of music tone is the show going for? And I did recognize like there is some metal in there that's happening, but
Yeah,
there was also more of like that traditional epic orchestral music that I associate with like movie theater epics and things like
right.
that. And I thought that was a really interesting combination happening. Like it was definitely speaking to different audiences. And I think that's the problem we end up having with the show overall is like it was trying to be so much to so many different groups of people that it didn't really land on anything. And I think that's why for a majority of people, it's a really mixed bag, like no matter like where you're coming at it from.
Sorry, I just want to add to that, like within metal music, like you have that band Ade from Italy who has the concept album to Spartacus, but amongst the mix of like the harsh vocals and like the heavy instrumentation of death metal, you also have elements of like folk music interspersed in there. And that's
Mm-hmm.
kind of just a way of making it seem more authentic, more, I guess, culturally in tune to who they are and their subject matter. And then you have other bands like Ex Deo who are combining elements of like symphonic music with metal. And it kind of does the same thing, sort of, it has like an element of like the classical, like I guess the seriousness of classical music,
Yeah.
it, that tone, that vibe
Mm-hmm.
mixed in with the harsh vocals and the growls
Yeah.
of death metal.
Yeah. I will admit, like, my most exposure to metal is either things that I can hear on classic rock stations or Evanescence. I really liked Evanescence. So, like, that is the limit of my exposure. So, I was really excited to get to talk to you a little bit more about the music aspect today because I am a noob. Lige, are you a noob?
Maybe a little bit more, maybe just a little bit less noobish than, I don't know. I like Architects. I mean, that's a band I know that I like.
Yeah.
It's not death metal, but
I mean, to be fair, death metal is an acquired taste. Not for
yeah.
everyone.
Yeah, and that's like, I think it's so cool though that that these are stories that we can tell. Like we have horror movies, like we have
Mm-hmm.
different types of horror books, and I feel like it's a different flavor of entertainment and storytelling. And so I do think that death metal is actually really cool, even if it's
Mm-hmm.
not necessarily always my bag. But I want to now go listen to this Spartacus concept album because I'm so intrigued. It sounds actually really, really cool. And I've always liked when films or like historical series incorporate modern music.
Mm-hmm.
I just think it's kind of fun, even if it's maybe a little bit discordant. But like, I'm thinking A Knight's Tale has like
Mm-hmm.
weird, funky music to it that makes no sense, but is kind of delightful. I know at Bridgerton, they do like all of the pop
Vitamin String
songs.
Quartet. I love
Yeah,
Vitamin String Quartet. Yeah.
in giving it this like weird historical flavor, but still with kind of this pop attitude. And so I think it works so well to have like this cartoonish slow motion blood spray, like with a bit of a metal riff in the background. I think
Mm-hmm.
that seems to like float off each other really well. So I kind of dig the music. And I like the way it just seemed to work with the kind of excess that is going on in every part of Spartacus.
Yeah.
You know what it reminds me of is kind of like with wrestlers when they enter the ring and they play like those really like heavy riffs and everything, and like it gets people pumped, it gets like the blood churning and all that. Like that's what it was giving me.
Yes. And this is where I like come around again and I'm like, do I like Spartacus? I'm like going all the way around.
So the other kind of question I have is like, it is this weird show that like it was trying to be something to like so much audiences that like us as an audience, we're coming back to it and we're enjoying it. We've mostly had nothing but women talking about this series so far, but it's like there are parts of here that are enjoyable, but I'm also very highly aware of like where the problematic stuff is. Like Alexander Stills talked about like the body image aspect of just like the harm being done by showing these ripped guys who couldn't actually perform in the role of gladiator, just realistically. And, we're really cognizant of that versus I go and look at the reviews of the like guys, the bros who are like, yeah. And I'm wondering, are they sitting here thinking about it's like, yeah, man, slavery sucks. And those poor women or things like that. It's like, is that crossing their mind at all? And so it's like one of those shows that's like, okay, I can get a lot out of this, but I'm afraid of like who the majority of the audience is and what they're getting out of it at the end of the day.
I think like when it comes to like the issue of, I guess, the overall treatment of women, there's some women on the show who get their revenge, sure. But then there are other women who just get horrific treatment, like Aurelia, and like just go through some of the most heart-wrenching things that, that I can fathom going through. And I don't know. I mean, yes, the men do suffer violent, gruesome deaths. I mean, there's no doubt about it. But in Vengeance, I feel like it got taken a step further with all the public crucifixions. And I was like, ooh, all right, this is where it's getting a little hard for me to watch.
Yeah, especially because like the majority of like the crucifixions that they focused on where were women that like we had a name and a little bit of personality, dialogue.
Right.
Like even Ilithia's like house slave. It's like even if you don't know that much about her, like her connection to Ilithia and you understanding why she's going up on that cross is again like just to show the pettiness of these Roman nobles.
Right.
And it's just like why are all the women death fodder? The minute Mira broke up with Spartacus, once they broke up, I'm like, death flag flying, she's gone. Like, just waiting for it now.
I thought the same thing.
So sad. Sad but true.
Sad but true.
Yeah. Especially like having just watched the prequel season too, because like what happened to Aurelia is almost exactly what happened to Navia's friend, who she like gave money to escape, and almost the exact same thing happens to Aurelia. It's like, did we really have to do that again?
Right?
Like, why? Didn't need to revisit this theme. There's plenty of other things to focus on, like putting some damn armor on those men.
For real.
No, we can't wear armor. We just wear.
Hide the abs.
Yeah,
we can't do that.
Oh, God forbid we can't see abs.
Like, you know what? Thighs too. It's like, you know what? These men don't get to show off their thighs nearly enough. We need to address that issue.
It did make me think about leg day. I'm like, huh.
Oh yeah, for sure. Yes. I do like that Crixus got like a cape. He has like an open, like, I don't know, like a coat with no sleeves or something. Like, why are you wearing that?
A traveler's cloak. There you go.
I feel like he was the only one who got to like put on an article of clothing.
Well, and then it's like there was a couple times like this time they're gonna do it. They're gonna put on the armor because they're pretending to be Romans. That makes sense.
They did that. Like, okay, wait,
and
like
they took it off, and I'm like, why? You are literally complaining about not having weapons.
Can we talk about the arena assault where they go in and they burn down the arena?
Yes, please.
That was really fun.
It was.
I cackled so hard when the arena collapsed. I'm sorry. I watched this again for the second time and I started laughing again. I was like, this is so stupid and absurd, but I love it.
Yes. I thought it was just going to be like that one section, right? Where it's like one section falls in. That's killing a lot of people. Like that seems like a catastrophe enough. And then just like dominoes and kept going.
Just keeps going.
I was like, I don't think that would happen, but okay. Yeah, it had that super excessive, ridiculous, they just killed so many people, like insaneness that I now expect from my Spartacus episods.
Yes. And there's also just like Spartacus is like, we're taking them so long. I'm like, they're doing the whole arena, man. Working on it.
Yeah, I think like from a just a narrative, like plot wise, that was gold. That was so much fun. Gannicus is there. He's gonna execute Animaeus and Crixus. Like that was so dramatic and fun. And then they actually, the truth about his wife comes out, which I was like, what, is it ever gonna come out?
Yeah, you knew it had to. They set it up. They set up people.
They did.
I called that one.
You did. You called that one.
He was not an apiary, unfortunately.
But I do love the way that Gannicus like returns in that like the only thing he really knows, the only skill he has is like being a gladiator. So even as a free person, if he wants to make some money, yeah, I'll go, do a session in the ring, do some executions, and and that made so much sense.
Just a lunchtime execution.
Yeah, just a little lunch.
Yeah,
just a little execution.
No need to be the primus. Yeah. In the primus, it's fine.
So yeah, that was so much fun. And cackling. Just
I think it was kind of the last time, like, I feel like Animaeus just kind of like fizzles out after that too, because you get like a little bit more of his backstory and how he came to the house of Batiatus and like what he figured out would be his motivation to fight. And like I think that was interesting because you know that does become the question. And reading the primary sources, it's just like they had such high numbers of people, but also it was really fragmented. Like people wanted different things, and so they didn't stay cohesive for like the 3 years that they were dealing with this slave war. And so I think it was cool that they were exploring with some of their main characters of just like, oh, the ludus is gone. Now what do I want out of my life? And I kind of like, because I was worried about Spartacus for that same reason, because as I said for season 1, at the end of season 1, it's like he never really stepped up to be a leader. It was always like what was most convenient for him to get to kill Batiatus, right? And then I liked that they kept a kind of this underlying motivation. It's like, but Glaber also, like I'm still after Glaber, who just happens to be this dude who is, trying to raise a force against me. So now we can move on. And that because otherwise it's like, yeah, why would he all of a sudden be preaching freedom and everything? He is always, his thing was always vengeance. He was always just kind of taking care of himself and, trying for the woman he loved. He just wants to go back home with the woman he loves. And now he can't. So now what does he do? So I thought that was a good thing. And it allows for enough time and growth, especially with the death of Mira as well, to be like, well, it looks like I'm a freedom fighter now. So here we go.
No, that tracks. I actually think Spartacus was like my least favorite storyline of this season. And one, just because like I can't help but comparing this new one to Andy Whitfield, and I like the old one a lot better. But I feel like, this guy stepped up to do something in a difficult situation. So it makes sense. Yeah. But I just found like his storyline through everything was like the one that I was least interested in. And I think it's interesting that it's Spartacus and vengeance, but like everybody has a little bit of vengeance that we see coming through like this entire season. So it does make a lot of sense. But like, I was even more interested in Crixus' storyline than Spartacus, which is saying something. But like, Argon and Nasir. Like neither of them died, right?
Nope, they're still alive. Although I will say,
we got one.
I love that couple, but once again, no sense of romantic buildup. Like all of a sudden, it's just like they're like Nasir is making eyes at Agron. Agron's doing his whole thing about being pissed off at the Gauls the whole time. And then all of a sudden they're kissing, and I'm like, when? How? Explain.
I'm glad I wasn't the only one who felt that way, because I was also like taken aback by that. I was like, wait, what? When did that happen? Was there any clue?
Slow burn, like build up to it, you guys.
No time for slow burn.
It doesn't just like that. Come on. So I was just like, damn it, you guys do not know romance. I said, the thing with Crixus and Navia got better because Navia's like, I have gone through some shit and I need to deal with that. And Crixus gave her the space and support she needed to deal with it. And you know what? Kudos to Crixus. You have improved.
Kudos to Crixus.
I was thinking about that. I was like, oh my God, this girl has like severe PTSD. You know, I'm sure like she's been there's no doubt she's been assaulted. You know, the amount of stuff this woman has dealt with, and like she's just being thrown around in the craziest, most terrifying situations that would trigger anyone's PTSD. And yeah, I like that Crixus he gave her space and he wasn't forceful on her because typically that would not happen in other TV shows about Rome, let's be real.
Yep.
Yeah.
And yeah, it definitely made me think about like trauma and PTSD and all that in the Roman world, which, you know, that's a discussion for another day. But yeah, I mean, I thought that was kind of refreshing.
Yeah.
I also thought it was satisfying. I mean, the thing that sort of took me off was the fact that, you know, they got a different actress for Navia now.
Yeah.
Which was like, oh, I don't know. Like, there was just something a little jarring about that. But, you know, she goes from like a place of hurt and trauma to all of a sudden being like, let me kill Asher. I want to beat the hell out of this guy and I want to make him suffer. And she's just going hog wild, you know, which, hey, listen, she's been through stuff. Can't say I blame her, but it's also like, oh, it's different.
Yeah.
Asher shows no remorse whatsoever. It's like, all right, if I got to kill a bitch, I will. In true Asher fashion. Yeah. Do we want to talk about Asher at the moment?
I guess we can.
Okay.
Because one of the big vengeance arcs I feel like is Navia's, is that she has been through all of this traumatic awfulness. She's working on her healing, and part of that is she wants to absolutely slaughter this guy who is so terrible to her. And hell yeah, I was like 100% on board. Asher was terrible.
Yeah.
Even worse this season than I think in either of the other two seasons. I was done.
Yeah.
But it is annoying to me that they would resurrect him for what is this, fourth season?
It will be a fourth season. So so it's called the House of Asher, which they were pulling from the series because like he names that a couple times, right?
I know.
He's got plans. And it's like the whole vengeance arc of Navia, you're just gonna be like, but what if he survived? And because I hadn't seen it yet, I knew that was the premise. And I'm like, is it like this whole he buried himself under a dead body, or like like you see like his neck get sliced and then he just falls to the ground, but maybe like Lucretia starts like his head is off. There is no surviving that.
He's so dead.
So dead.
So dead.
I didn't even know they were making a new season on that asshole, and now we have to sit through it?
Right?
Are they like trying to... Are they... They're testing us.
Yes.
Yes. So...
Just... Who asked for this and why?
No one.
Thank you.
It literally came about because Ridley Scott is like, I'm going to do Gladiator 2. And they're like, hold up. What do we got?
And there's so many issues with that stupid sequel coming out that just...
But I want to make a prediction. Like, what the hell would this story be about? Because they're definitely saying it's like, oh, what if he survived? It's like he didn't survive on Mount Vesuvius. Don't even. No, he dead. He very dead. But I liked that moment. Like he's about to like have all of his goons swear an oath to him. He gets interrupted by Glaber, right?
Yeah.
And so I'm imagining like maybe they're gonna do what they did with Batiatus in the prequel, is like as he's dying or having his head removed. I don't know. He is envisioning if that oath hadn't been broken and he has his goons on his side and Glaber, like they didn't betray him or whatever, what does Asher do? And what I think would be cool, even though I hate Asher and want nothing to do with him, I want him to become a pirate, because pirates are also involved in this story. Spartacus was he got trapped down in the toe of Italy, And he's like, I need to get to Sicily. We're going to work with some pirates. And the pirates don't come through. And you know why they don't come through? Osher. That's what
legit.
I want.
That makes
You know,
sense.
that would be spectacular. And I have a feeling that's not going to happen.
What else are you going to do? And then you get Pompey, right? Because Pompey, after he deals,
I know.
you know, he steals Crassus's glory. He spends some time dealing with the pirates.
I was looking this up. I wanted to find the little thing. And it says, Starz said in an official statement, in the aftermath of the defeat of Spartacus and his rebel army, the drama will depict a new tale of treachery, deceit, and blood unfolding beneath the foreboding shadow of Rome. So it's taking place like after Spartacus' like complete defeat.
Put me in the writing room. I can do it better. Listen, guys, everyone's done Roman gladiators, but have they done pirates?
No, nobody's done pirates. We need pirates.
We need pirates.
We do need pirates. I agree.
So, but apparently that is not what we're getting. We are getting something we do not need, and we are robbing Navia of her glory in doing so.
Why? Why would we do that?
Also, Lucy Lawless, done real dirty by that man. He deserved to die on so many levels. I don't even like Lucretia that much, but like, I really don't like him. So
yeah.
I was just gonna say, like, it's remarkable, like how, at least my opinion on Lucretia has shifted from the first season, House of Batiatus and Vengeance, and just how perplexing she is as a character, as far as like how she gets reintroduced in Vengeance as being like traumatized and like just insane and everything. And then you find out that like she's just been scheming and plotting this whole time, and just wild.
Yeah. Like I said, I consider this her Cassandra phase, where like
makes sense.
The depiction of Cassandra is like as a prophetess, but also a little unkempt, if you will. And I thought that was really interesting. And what I did like about it is I kind of always figured like she was going to do something about that baby.
Oh yeah.
I did not expect what she did with the baby. Like, I expected her, like, everything was robbed from me. I am taking this kid. I expected that. Did not expect her.
Life.
Well, there's that. But also, actually, I did expect that. Like, I was waiting for that. I was not expecting that it was going to come from a place of belief on her part. Like, it was because it was, right? Like, there were times where, like, it didn't seem like she was buying this whole idea that she'd been, you know, saved by when she's told to, like, go into town and it's like, the gods bless you. The gods. She's like, oh, not right now.
Yeah.
But, like, at the end, like, I felt that she had actually reconciled, in her mind, she had reconciled with Alithia. And, like, what she was doing was just what was meant to be. And it wasn't necessarily from, like, wanting to take it didn't feel like a place of vengeance for her at the end. It was just like, I went through something and this is going to be how I take care of it, in a very mentally unhealthy way, unfortunately, but like it made sense. And it was strangely not from a place of vengeance, which I thought was interesting. It was not where I would have expected the scheming to be like this catty thing still between the two. And it wasn't that. Alithia was kind of that, but even Alithia was authentic sometimes.
Yeah. I was literally going to say when we were talking, like, let's talk about Alithia and Lucretia.
Yes.
Because, I feel like I don't like the endings that both of them got. Yeah. I did sort of expect the baby slicing to occur. Because, Lucy Lawless was just making way too many comments about the child and how we're protecting you and the gift, the great gift that you carry or whatever.
Yeah.
And so she was very, very fixated on that. And I think like you, that she was going to slice and run, but to live and raise a child, because that was something that she was really fixated on in the previous seasons and is one of those things that's like expected of her as a Roman woman, is to like have an heir for her family and her house. And so it was, this big ball of shame that she was still carrying around. And I guess, I did not expect, once she was standing by the cliff, I was like, oh, they're going over. But I didn't, I thought she was still lucid and in that way.
Yeah.
But I couldn't actually put my finger on Alithia. Like, sometimes it seemed like she was also like, we're friends now. I need you because things are crazy and I'm going to push you off this balcony.
Yeah. She is someone who clings to the patriarchal system, right?
Sure. Yep.
When it goes against her, she'll use whatever she can. And in that case, turning to Lucretia, who has this big secret on her and everything and had been her enemy before, that's all she has. So she turns to it and uses it. But once she can use men in positions of power, that's what she'll always gravitate towards. Because that's what she did with her father. That whole setup of I will say for Glaber, it's he kind of was just this man you didn't really expect anything from, and then he went dark, and you're like, oh, okay, all right, I'm scared now for you too, Alithia.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of my sense of her, and I don't necessarily see that as problematic because that's still the case for many women today, right? Some people do cling to the patriarchal structure because that is what they know, and they do know how to extract some level of power from it, even if it disenfranchises them. Otherwise, so
and others, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And you use that to your advantage, right? That's how all of these systems work. Is the people who don't have power are forced to turn against each other to please the people in power, just for just a little bit more agency, a little bit better choice, or something like that. So the harm is always done to those most disenfranchised. But so she works as that. I don't have much more to say than that, other than the whole sepia scene. It's that was a lot.
That was a lot. Because I really thought for a brief moment that all three women were going to work together. I did actually think. I was okay,
I hoped.
Everybody is on board. We all hate the dudes. Let's kill them and not each other. And I was really briefly hoping that they would turn all of their scheming outward. And then Sepia, no.
Yeah. I do also want to point out that Alithia would not have been put in the position she was in with her husband either, based on what it sounded like. It was her father who had the power to dissolve their marriage. That means her father held Manu over her instead of her husband.
Right.
So that whole reading of the will and stuff, especially if he never really liked Glaber either, it would go to her paternal uncle or something. There would be someone else on her father's side of the family that would take charge of her than her husband. So it's that doesn't quite pan out. Although I guess it's complicated. I would have to look more into Roman marriages gone sideways, I guess, to be sure.
I think the laws also change a little bit, than the Augustan age. So
they do, but that's more related to when you had children.
Sure.
And didn't need a tutor. I forget which type of marriage was more popular, because it was more advantageous to keep your inheritance with your father's family. And that's why so many women were divorcing all the time at that point, right? Livia Drusilla here is pregnant with child number 2 with her husband, but I know you just had a baby too, but maybe we could make this work. So it's there were some weird things happening with marriages there that she wouldn't have been stuck in that position, I don't believe. I think she would have had someone besides her father in her family that would have addressed that issue. So that was plot, whatever.
I feel like they were doing the best, maybe not the best. I feel like they did decently well with what they had.
They spent a lot of time researching a ludus and gladiatorial fights, and it's but Roman marriage, how does that work? Like our marriages, right? It's messy.
Certainly got messy when Glaber goes and kills her father, and it's just so cold-blooded. There is just nothing there. I mean, you know what, I could help you, but I would rather just let the fires consume you. And just blame it on Spartacus, because that's believable.
Married to the rebel.
Yep.
Exactly.
On me.
My hands are clean.
Clean. Well, yeah, and then he goes and completely slaughters Sepius and his whole family.
That poor kid. All he did was an eye roll. Come on. Okay, he did more than an eye roll, but all he did wasn't shared his troops. He didn't want to share his toys. It's fine.
The only guy that I'm happy who, was killed in the arena was that creepy guy. The one who like did all those horrible things to that slave girl in the house of Batiatus.
Yes.
You know.
Yeah. Oh,
Yes.
that guy in the Pulvinus.
Yeah, I hated that guy.
Creepy guy. I'm
Ugh,
sorry, actor. You just look creepy,
looked
and I'm glad
so
you leaned
creepy.
into it.
But yeah.
he did very well in that role as an actor, but it's also like, I hate this man, and it was very satisfying to watch him get speared like right in the heart.
Yeah.
And I was like,
yes.
I think Andy was sitting next to me when that happened, and I'm like, the spear flies. It's like, well, I know it's not going to get Glaber, but like, I'm going to be happy with whoever it is at this point. And it hit him. I'm like, yep,
Love
that
it.
was good. Felt that one.
at least Glaber has like a stylish like cheek wound.
Yes,
I mean, that's kind of cool.
Yes,
yeah.
Slice.
But yeah, it was just very satisfying to watch that creeper just get speared right in the heart. And just, I was like, I am entertained.
Yeah. The other person that died in the arena was Roscos, who was like that big brutish gladiator who the one former Chidara was hooking up with. He's like, I'm doing it for position. And then she betrayed, like, she's going to betray. And I'm like, why do we have the promiscuous one who is trying to survive be the betrayer of all of these slaves? Why?
Yeah.
Why?
I know.
Right. And it's like, why couldn't people just be a little nicer to her? All she wanted was a little attention.
Yeah.
I don't know. Yeah. You can't blame a sister for that.
Yeah. No.
Yeah. It continued to, like, this one definitely felt like a lot of, as I mentioned, death fodder of secondary female characters. That was just really painful to watch. Also, Elijah, after they're running away from the mines and they're in the forest, were you getting flashbacks to Centurion at all?
Kind of, yeah. It was like
the slow picking off of all of the black actors.
Oh my god, yes. It's ridiculous.
Ooh, that's right.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. But no, that was like a whole episode that we spent running through the woods in the dark.
Yes. Did you want to talk about the mine as well?
Yes,
you mentioned one.
I hate the mine sequence because I think it makes no sense. Sure, they're a fake cart of slaves. They're like doing the Han and the Wookiee into the mines. But there's like guards everywhere. And suddenly they're just like standing and waiting for Mira to like grab a map and kill this guy, and nobody hears or comes running, and they just like kill some random guards, and I'm like, where's everyone else? You were all out in the open. And then I'm like, why are we just running through tunnels and like nobody, and people are just still working? And like, the entire sequence I thought was so stupid. And there's a convenient door, and we conveniently have the key, and we conveniently lock it and unlock it, and we conveniently get out when there's guards everywhere. I don't
realize Spartacus is like, we'll come back for you guys. I don't think they do.
No, of course they don't.
Versus have been really smart just to free a bunch of them. Like, it's like, hey, you guys want your chance? Hold on to your pickaxe. Have that.
That's really where I thought it was going, and I was so surprised. They're just like, we're just here for one girl. So I just
wasted opportunity.
And I don't know. They had to go to the mines. They had to find Navia, but from a heist perspective, it did not hit.
Yeah, I do like. I don't know if I like. I just like. I find it entertaining that like the historical record says like, so initially what the gladiators do is start moving south and looting a bunch of places, and the explanation given to us in this show is we're going villa to villa looking for Navia, who's just been handed out to different men.
Yep.
And I'm like, it works, I guess.
It's pretty wild, like how much like time and resources they spend finding this one person. And listen, I get it, she's important to Crixus, but it's also like, couldn't Crixus like do this with like 2-3 other Gauls? Did they have to bring everyone? Because I don't know if that's really a good use of manpower when your numbers are fair and few in between already.
That's why Agron's like, I'm out, y'all. Nah.
Like, nah, man.
I kind of agreed with it.
So I like that we're presented with the trolley cart problem a few times early on. And there's also a point, you guys, Crixus is spitting Sojourner's truth, ain't I a woman, at some point when he's talking about Navia and going after her. It's like, doesn't she bleed? And I'm like, Did someone read Ain't I a Woman and decide to like incorporate that?
Oh.
Go back and listen. This sounds slightly Shakespearean, right?
Oh man. I feel like it got worse. The way they talk got worse.
It did. It was like when John Hannah was doing it, I'm just like, oh, those Brits.
Yeah.
When a bunch of other people are doing it, I'm like, wait a
Stop
minute.
talking like that. Why would you say it like that? But yeah, no. The mines did bother me, but I thought the Battle of Vesuvius was silly and fun.
and somewhat legit, apparently, according to what records we have. I also, apparently, we know Spartacus is a true terror when he takes the horse from the commander, and they didn't show the horse, because that is when Rome is like, oh shit. They took his horse.
They took his horse.
Well, now we have a problem.
Yeah, right.
So the other part I want to talk about is thinking about, again, what I liked about this show was asking this question of like, how did all of these random people get together and actually make a credible threat to Rome? Like, after this point, they're going to get their consuls on the job, and then the consuls fail. And it's like, who's the richest guy we know who can buy all the troops? Because the Senate does not have the funds to like actually put out a good force to go against Spartacus. And it's really interesting to think about. So first of all, this is the third slave war, and there had been ones before the third slave war, or before the first and second slave wars, apparently attributed to the cult of Bacchus. And I'm like, I want to know more.
I'm intrigued.
I know, right? Like, so they I forget what words were being used, but they were describing it more as like conspiracies or something like that. But like the context is because after this, we don't really hear of any more slave revolts. So like, why were these three mostly happened in the 2nd century BCE? And so like, what was going on in the world that this was the moment that Spartacus could actually be a credible threat? And part of it, like what I thought one of the cool things was Mithridates was happening. So according to Appian, he says of Mithridates, he knew that almost all of Italy had recently revolted from the Romans because of the hatred the Italians had for them, that the Italians had fought a protracted war against the Romans, and that every had sided with the gladiator Spartacus against the Romans, even though he was wholly a disreputable person. And the character that helps us make sense of that is Lucius.
Yeah.
Lucius. Where like, this is not long after Sulla and his conscripts, where he disenfranchised a bunch of Romans from their land and killed a lot of families. He was also the first to march on Rome, you guys. Sulla was, not Julius Caesar. I think, it was Sulla, right? That was the first one to really do it.
Pretty sure it was.
Yeah. Okay. So I liked the inclusion of Lucius as like an explanation of, how did their numbers swell up so much? Like, how were they not quelled so quickly? And part of this is like, it was just kind of a local issue where you have like local police forces or the National Guards trying to address the problem, because they really viewed it as like bandits.
Yeah.
But you do have like this large population outside of Rome that are really pissed off at the Senate. And they're like, I don't see an issue here. And the one thing that I don't necessarily like about Lucius, like, I think that context matters of like why they might have had more support than we're led to believe just from this show. Because, they keep saying it's like everyone in town and Capua is in a panic. And I'm like, are they though? Or is it just the people who have a lot of slaves that are in a panic?
Yeah.
Everyone else is probably just like, not my problem. And what was really, I had learned this recently, what was really interesting about the first Servile Wars is like, they weren't gladiators, they were shepherds. And that's why most of them took place in Sicily.
Yep.
As well as southern Italy, is because shepherds at that time were like badass shepherds, right? They're going around moving cattle up and down. They've got to protect that herd from predators and thieves. So like, they use weapons and they get to move freely. And so they were usually the ones starting slave revolts. And that was a lot of the initial numbers that joined Spartacus. And why that was probably important is like, they would have had knowledge of the countryside.
Sure.
Because they're not fighting like Romans in formation. I liked the step formation of like, shot 1, shot 2, or shot 3, so they could storm the wall. I'm like, the gladiators aren't doing it.
Yeah, no.
but like, it would have really probably been guerrilla warfare, a lot of this,
Sure.
right? To especially to start out. Like later on, we have bigger numbers, I'm sure that changed to some degree, but I think it would have been cool to like really, I think that's what they were trying to do with Lucius, is show like both the countryside would have been really upset with Rome at this time. Spartacus and his men would have had maybe some broader support than we'd otherwise know. Yeah. But then he also had this like local, he's an old man in a hut with doing archery, and he knows the land and everything like that. Like, yeah. And so I think they were trying to do a lot with his character.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I'm sad that he died, because I do think he was really interesting. And I think they've also kind of played on this just with the senatorial-esque characters, in that they are infighting like crazy. And that's the political climate right now, is like this very, very fractured, almost like gang warfare between all of these different political demagogues in some way or another. And they're all kind of trying to climb the ladder at the same time. That's why, what's his name? The guy who came back?
Verinius?
Is it Verinius? Yeah.
The pretty guy?
Yeah. Like Verinius and Glaber were not at all friends and very much enemies, but they end up like attacking Spartacus together. And so, yeah, the factionalism of Rome at this time absolutely helped this type of slave revolt really gain traction. And yeah, I do think that the fact that they're like weaving that in is really interesting. And again, I'm coming around. Do I like Spartacus?
There was a realistic discussion of Sulla. There was some historical context provided. I think the other thing is why it was happening at this time is like, this is just when like Rome had really started to expand, and it had a huge influx of war prisoners working as slaves. Sure. So a lot of these people had most likely been enslaved within their own lifetimes. And so it's like, I know what freedom is. I also know how to fight. So someone's willing to fight, I'll join up. But what I liked about the show then is like, but then you have these groups from all over, right? Like you've got the Germans, you've got the Gauls, you've got Gannicus the Celt, you've got the Thracians, you've got the Syrians that no one trusts. Yeah, how do you communicate with each other? How do you make different cultures get along with each other? Because there are some gripes between different groups of people that are really hard to address. And I liked that this show is like, yeah, this is not a cohesive unit, y'all.
Yeah, yeah.
Speeches of freedom will only get you so far.
Well, especially like when it comes to like these different ethnic groups all kind of working under like Spartacus, except they end up aligning themselves more with Spartacus's like friends and commanders who are of those nationalities. And I thought that was really interesting, because it's a perspective I hadn't really considered. How do you unite these men and slaves of different origins and identities into a single cohesive unit? And yeah, that's why I'm not too mad at the fact that some of those gladiators end up going off on their own early in the season to go pursue their own interests. And it's nice when they all meet up again, because then it's like, like we have a chance and everything. But yeah, it definitely brings up interesting questions and discussions about, how to get these people working together and get along, for that matter.
Yeah,
for sure.
And the reality is they don't fully, like, their forces do break apart. They do end up having different aims over time. And like
a lot of like mistrust and suspicion too.
Yeah. And there was something I was really interesting as I was reading through this text, is like this particular focus on the Syrians. Like I was trying to figure out, it's like, is that just an Ashur thing that we're like really, and then they introduced Nasir as well. And it's like, no, that was actually kind of, they were kind of the newest group on the market at that point because of recent Roman excursions. So there was kind of a sentiment against any group of people from the East. They just labeled them all Syrian. And I thought that was, that's true of the historical record. But I was trying to think about the time this was happening. The show was coming out. I'm like, is ISIS happening? Like, what is happening at this time that like they might be pushing that message a little bit? Like, how can we make Ashur just a little bit more hateable and keep calling him the Syrian?
That is actually a really good point.
Yeah.
Like, does that correlate with like the migration of Syrians into like Europe and Italy and Greece?
It's weird because ISIS is definitely starting to come up around that time. It's not too long after the Arab Spring, I believe. So there's definitely some things going on. I don't know if it's to like the full extent of when we
Right.
in the United States were really heavily involved in the conflict and everything. But it's like, it was interesting that it was there because like, I know it's there for 300 with the
Oh,
whole
yeah.
Persians post 9/11 stuff is like, I know it's there. This one, I was like, is it there? I can't tell.
Yeah.
It might be there. I'm not sure.
Yeah, I had not thought of that.
Yeah. So, you know, the same as like how music and film are influencing each other. It's like very real historical events are shaping
Sure.
maybe how we're portraying some of these characters from particular regions. That was a thought I had, but I wasn't really, I didn't get a clear answer for myself on that one. So I do have a couple more reviews
Yes, please.
to read really quick.
Read me.
This is from, most of these are like, so one's actually a contributor to HuffPost, and it was a woman this time. So I'm like, okay, that'll be interesting. And then this other one was on Rotten Tomatoes. So 3 stars out of 5. Things are starting to head south for this series. The story is starting to repeat itself and get boring. And while Liam McIntyre is a solid Spartacus, you can feel the difference between him and Andy Whitfield. He is sorely missed. Now that everyone has been freed and it has turned into more of a generic war story, things are just not as entertaining and racy as they once were. Hopefully the final season can end with a bang. I'm like, it wasn't racy enough for you? How many times did we end up in a brothel,
I was
my
like,
friend?
I'm sorry, what? There was just as many like boobs and dicks as the last season.
Maybe less dicks. I think there were less dicks this time. I think they're lightening up on the dicks this time.
Some more boobs.
I don't know. Maybe a little bit.
I did see more nipple piercings.
Yes. Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
Can't get rid of those.
No.
Ouch. Imagine getting a piercing in the ancient world. Like, just ouch.
God, ew, no.
That's true.
I
would do not want.
No.
I would do a tattoo. They've been around forever. It's like, I'd probably go for a tattoo at least, but yeah, piercing, no. No.
Yikes.
All right. And then this other one, as I said, is by Maureen Ryan, a TV critic for the Huffington Post. And then she was writing specifically about the finale. It was completely insane, and yet it made complete sense. And you know what I mean? Because you're a Spartacus fan. That's what I love about this show. Love, logic, vengeance, and mercy combined in ways that seem chaotic and nuts. But deep down, we know that everything that happens makes sense on both an intellectual and emotional level.
That might be going a little far.
These holy shits are earned, my friends. Am I right? Oh, and I think it ends somewhere. It's like, and so talking about all the deaths and all that happened amidst the well choreographed chaos of battles, sneak attacks, and flying balls of fire. Yes, I too saw the flying balls of fire.
You know, yep.
So the last thing I wanted to say is, like, I know vengeance was like the whole theme, but what I was getting angry at again was like, we're tying it to this concept of love. Love is talked about a lot too, right? And specifically heterosexual love, because Nasir and Agron, no conversation whatsoever about love. They are just two guys who I'm happy to see together. But like everyone else is like talking about, you know, Oenomaus upon the, you know, finding out about his wife Melita and Gannicus, the conversations between Mira and Spartacus, the relationship between Glaber, Alithia, and Sepia, are all these conversations of how like love is going to fuck you up. So better to get vengeance. I see a problem with this, you guys.
I think I got something slightly different. I thought you were going somewhere slightly different. I guess, yeah, it is that love will fuck you up, but I think it's also that people will do really extreme things for love. And I think that's like even Spartacus, right, is on that line where he's kind of still doing a crazy thing for his dead wife in protracting this insane vengeance kick. But like Crixus is, you know, gallivanting around the countryside and losing a lot of their manpower for one girl that is the love of his life, right? Yeah, and like Lucretia slices open Alithia's belly for this love of...
She should be dead, by the way. Caesarean sections in the ancient world and in the medieval world are basically death sentences for the woman.
She lost way too much blood.
Right.
No, she's dead. Yeah. But yeah, I feel like that there are just like these very, very dramatic extremes that people will go to for love. And maybe sometimes that's a good thing, and sometimes it's really not.
Yeah. I think like the where I saw it as problematic is like going back to that idea of stoicism with Spartacus. Like I loved the amicable breakup between him and Mira.
Yeah, that's great. That's fine.
And that is also the moment when he like fully embraces his role as the leader of this group, I feel like. Because then he's like, okay, she's dead. I'm not going to get emotional about it the way I did for my wife. And I'm going to come up with this crazy plan that's going to save us all. And it's like him fully, like him leaving this relationship to take up kind of a sober leadership position. It is like, it's got that stoicism to it again. And like, I imagine we're going to, like, he's not going to have, I really feel like he will not have a love interest in that final. It wouldn't make sense to give him one at this point.
But then how would he have sex?
You have other people have sex. I don't know. Does our protagonist need to have sex?
In this show, I feel like you might have to, yes. But
flashbacks.
I guess, okay, flashbacks. There you go. Okay. No, you're right. You're right.
That's all I got. I don't know. It's got that undertone to me. It's like, I don't see him having another love interest at this point. So yeah. So that was just kind of my final thought is like, it's, as Alexandra says, it's like, it's got woke-like stuff in it. It's not woke, but it's also definitely dog whistling to all like far right rhetoric and things like that, incel culture and things like that. Like, and that's what I hate is like, I know what I'm getting out of it and what I'm critical of. I don't know if everyone else is.
Sure.
So
yeah.
All right. Any other final thoughts from you two? I guess I should ask. I already gave my prediction for House of Usher. I want to hear your guys' final predictions, and then we'll close up. I want pirates. That is my go-to.
Sure. I love Gannicus. He's my favorite character. He continues to be a solidly told just arc of this very, very cynical person finding his friends again and sort of finding himself. And he's just delightful. And I love that in their little party fight, he was like, hold my beer. I'm going to go wrestle this guy. So yeah, Gannicus is my favorite. And I have no idea what to expect from the House of Usher. Because like, what else can we do? How else can we be completely terrible and awful? What scheme would he be running? Are we like getting up to, I don't know. Are they going to try to like
Julius Caesar take over
That's
Rome?
What I'm wondering. I'm like, are we trying to go for like the big events and like stuff? Like we're not going to get to Vesuvius erupting yet. So like, yeah, are we going to be part of the other big political events that happen at this time period? Somehow? I don't know. And I don't care to find out.
We might have to at some point down the line.
Don't make me.
How about you, Christina? Any predictions you're feeling for the House of Usher? Other than hopefully he dies at the end of it for real.
Well, yes. I hope he dies. Someone listening to this out of context, it's going to be a disaster. But I don't know. I feel like it's going to be a hot mess, to be honest. It's like, I don't know what more they can squeeze out of this guy. Like, I don't know. Perhaps this is my humble opinion, but I feel like Usher is probably one of the more detested characters on the show because he's just an asshole. And I don't know. It looked like he was pretty dead at the end of Vengeance. I don't know how they could resurrect this fool, but
even Navia's like, you're right. It is really hard
to cut off a man's head. Yeah, it is.
But
that's
she
the quote
did
of the season.
Quote of the season, yes.
Yeah, that's all I have. I mean, maybe I'll watch it. Maybe I won't, just purely out of spite. But I don't know. I mean, there's already Gladiator 2 is already working on my nerves.
Right.
And now you spring this on me. It's like, shit.
I know. And then the people they have in Gladiator 2, it's like, but I like you. Why?
It's supposed to be taking place in the reign of Septimius Severus, right? It's like, I'm sorry, who did you pick to play these guys from the Severan dynasty? Like,
yeah,
this is where I take personal issue because, I did study the Severans and I worked under a Severan scholar. So it's like, no, I don't like, I mean, yeah, Denzel Washington is cool, but it's also like, in this role, like, Yeah, but to get back on topic, House of Usher, no thank you, unless I'm really bored. Yeah.
I love it.
Yeah. Yep. I think we all share that sentiment. So I'm going to go ahead and wrap us up for the evening. All right. Special thanks to Christina for joining us today. If people want to learn more about you, where should they go and find you?
I mean, I'm pretty active on X. I also have my Instagram account. I'm also on Facebook. I also have a Blue Sky, but I honestly forget about it because Blue Sky is kind of like the faculty lounge of social media now. So it's also like,
it is. I try.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It do be like that.
It do.
Oh, and can you let us know about your upcoming project as well?
Yeah, I'll be working on another article on Roman empresses in metal with Messalina and Agrippina. As far as things coming up immediately, I'll be presenting at CamWest on Agrippina and metal. So that should be interesting. I mean, I have to finalize the paper, brush it up, but yeah, that's kind of what I'm doing.
Awesome. All right. Well, we'll be back next time to wrap up our discussion of Starz' Spartacus with an overview of its current final season, War of the Damned. I don't think it's going to end well, y'all.
No,
I don't think so either.
No.
No spoilers.
No spoilers. Everyone's dead, but no spoilers.
But no spoilers.
Yeah. We'll have a couple of new guests joining us for that one, so stay tuned. As for you listeners, you can find us on most major streaming platforms, as well as movieswedig.com. Please like, review, and subscribe if you like what you hear. You can also follow us on Instagram, Facebook, and Blue Sky under some variation of the handle @MoviesWeDig. We look forward to seeing you all soon.